All right, talking about gray and white matter distribution in the spinal cord. So we have four different objectives here. We want to distinguish the four anatomic locations of gray matter in the spinal cord, name the types of neurons and functional groups or nuclei found in each gray matter region, and then identify the location of white matter in the spinal cord, and lastly, name the three anatomic divisions of the white matter and explain their general composition. All right, so we'll start off with the gray matter. Gray matter is made of neurons, cell bodies, dendrites, and unmyelinated axons, just meaning that they don't have any of that fatty tissue or myelin surrounding the axons that allow for faster transmission of signals. And gray matter also includes glial cells. So masses of gray matter project from the center of the spinal cord. So we have three different masses. We have the anterior horns that are going to have the cell bodies of somatic motor neurons. Those are the ones that are going to the skeletal muscle. The lateral horns are going to have the cell bodies of autonomic motor neurons. So you can remember those as the automatic motor neurons. So they're going to be going ahead and innervating all of those structures that are our viscera, so our heart and our blood vessels and our kidneys and digestive system, and they are only present in the parts T1 through L2, so thoracic 1 and then lumbar 2. The posterior horns are the last mass of gray matter that we find in the spinal cord, and those house axons of sensory neurons and cell bodies of interneurons. So that's going to be the back part of the spinal cord. Those are going to be going ahead and having all the sensory neurons, and then those interneurons that are communicating between the sensory and the motor neurons. So you can see here in our picture, you can go ahead and very easily kind of see this butterfly shape that we have. That's going to be the gray matter, showing the three different horns of gray matter that we have. So we can see that labeled here as the posterior horn. We've got the lateral horn and then the anterior horn, and you can see where those are located in the diagram. All right, talking some more about gray matter, we have what's called the gray commissure, which we also saw on the previous slide, and it's a horizontal band of gray matter that surrounds the central canal, and that's the very center of the spinal cord in the very middle of that kind of butterfly structure that we saw. This horizontal band contains unmyelinated axons that connect the left and right gray matter. So if you were to split that butterfly in half, the only way that they're able to communicate is through the gray commissure surrounding that central canal. So remember that nuclei are just groups of cell bodies. So we have two different types of nuclei that we're going to find in our gray matter. We're going to have the sensory nuclei, which are of course going to be in the posterior horn, where we've got those interneurons, right, in the back part of the spinal cord. Two different types. We've got the somatic sensory nuclei, so they're receiving signals from the skin, the muscle, the joints, right, all those things that are moving about. And then the visceral sensory nuclei are going to be the ones from our blood vessels and our viscera. So kind of thinking of, the autonomic and the somatic in the motor nervous system. But this is going to be, of course, the sensory part. So then the other types that we have are the motor nuclei, which are going to be the anterior and lateral horns. Of course, those are going to be where all of our motor functions are going to be happening. So again, we've got our somatic motor nuclei. So there's going to be the anterior that are going to innervate the skeletal muscle, and then the autonomic motor nuclei, which are lateral and are going to innervate or go ahead and be in the smooth muscle, heart, and glands. So we can see here, notice that the anterior is towards us, right? And the posterior is back here. So again, our anterior root and our lateral root, we're going to go ahead and see that those are going to be our motor neurons. And then they're going to come together right here with all those sensory neurons. And what you're going to find is in that posterior / lateral section there, we're going to see some of those interneurons that are communicating in between the sensory and the motor neurons. All right, so talking about the white matter now that we find in the spinal cord. Remember that white matter is just myelinated axons that are going to and from the brain, okay? So that gray matter was made up of cell bodies and dendrites and unmyelinated axons and glial cells. White matter is strictly myelinated axons that are going to and from the brain. So we have several different regions of white matter. We have the posterior funiculus. This sits between the posterior gray horns and posterior median sulcus, and it contains sensory tracts. These are just axon bundles, right? A nerve that are called fasciculi that are coming through for picking up on that sensory information. And then we have the lateral funiculus that sits on lateral sides of the spinal cord and contains ascending sensory and descending motor tracts. So remember, these are just tracts of myelinated axons that are coming through. We've just named them specific regions because of the different types of function that they're going to go ahead and carry. Lastly, we have the anterior funiculus that sits between the anterior gray horns and anterior median fissure, and it's got left and right anterior funiculi, and they're connected by a white commissure. They contain the ascending sensory and descending motor tracts, just like we saw in the lateral funiculus. So please take some time to actually look at the pictures of the spinal cord to go ahead and pick out where these different regions of white matter are.